Welcome back to Be the Change podcast with me, Stephanie Howlett, CEO of Diversity NL. Have a listen as we explore real life, vulnerable topics on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Become awakened, create culture of inclusion, be brave, have impact by being an ally. Explore how you can be the change that you always wanted to be. We respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, and the island of Uktamaguk as the ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq and Beothuk. We'd like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatukavut and the Innu of Nitassinan and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We open our hearts and minds as we strive for respectful relationships with all First Peoples of this province. We search for collective healing and true reconciliation as we honor this beautiful land together and commit ourselves to being stewards who will respect the cultures, traditions, and ceremonies of all who call it home. Welcome back to Be the Change podcast. We have a very special guest today. We have Amy Harrison. I've known Amy, I'd say, for probably 2+ years now. She is the fabulousness behind Pixel and Pieces. So she designed my fantastic logo, website. We spent many hours together working live online, and I've loved every single moment of it. So if you're looking for any website development design greatness, I'm going to call you my graphic guru, because you truly are. You can work magic, and I love it. So you're a graphic and web designer. You're from Halifax, Nova Scotia, with over 20 years of experience. And you're neurodiverse. And you're very optimistic. I know we've had some great conversations and we want to get into that today. So you want to know what empowers others and you want to see those opportunities. So after spending time in working in traditional environment, shall we call it, like large government organizations, academic institutions, you began cultivating your ideal lifestyle and what that looks like for you as an entrepreneur. You love helping small business owners like myself gain confidence in their brand with your DIY friendly approach. I love it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get a little bit into, Amy, your story and about how how this has come, I guess, about talking about neurodiversity, because we've talked about this a bit. What has your story unfolded like? What does it look like?
Well, so I've been a graphic designer for 20 years now. Excuse me. I've bounced a lot around. I've worked for governments, I've worked for small nonprofits, and kind of everything in between. About almost 5 years ago now, I was working for a large organization, and I was having problems in that organization. There was a lot of change. There was sometimes I was just bored because I could do work quickly. And in the end, I ended up getting let go, and it wasn't the first time. I go to an organization, I spend 2, 3, 4 years there, and then all of a sudden it's not a good fit. And so I was let go. And during the time that I was having trouble in that organization, I happened to be able to see they had a conflict resolution coach on staff. And so I started seeing her. And after a few sessions, she said to me, "Have you considered that you might be neurodiverse?" And I was like, "What does that mean? What? I don't know." I have a cousin who married an autistic man. They have 3 autistic children. Their world is very different to mine. So when I think of, autism and neurodiversity in that way, I was thinking, no. I'm very high functioning. I went to a psychologist. They said there wasn't enough evidence in my childhood, which is very common for women of my age. And so basically they were like, yeah, your employers are just kind of jerks. You're fine. Don't worry about it. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take my ball and go home. I've had enough of this bouncing around. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So I joined an entrepreneur program and I launched my business on January 1st, 2020. So I'm, a few years into this and it's been absolutely great. It's since then, A year and a bit ago, I visited a different clinic in British Columbia and actually did confirm an ADHD diagnosis. And that journey has been amazing and incredible and crazy. Yeah.
Break it down what ADHD is for those people who may not know.
Well, it's interestingly not named properly, in my opinion, and some people share that opinion. ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. In the 80s, 90s, it was for young boys who couldn't sit down. And there was only one type, and that was it. Now there are actually three types. So there is hyperactive, which, pretty self-explanatory. There's inattentive, of which I have, and then there's combination. I might have a little combination. I'll share with you. I'm fidgeting with this clothespin under the window here. I keep it attached to my microphone. So if you hear any like little clicks like this, that's what I'm doing. So inattentive essentially means the physical hyperactivity that we witnessed in little boys is actually happening inside my brain. My brain goes to about 50 different places. There's a lot of great things about it. I can do something called hyperfocus, so I can just like really put blinders on and focus on one thing. Sometimes I can get a full week of work done in a day. It's fantastic. I have something called that I do. It's like bullet train brain. So, if you start talking about a project, I can be like 3 stations down the road, already identified the destination before you're even finished like the sentence. There's a lot of different symptoms. It can be quite personalized. The symptom that is the most negative that I have found that I have that's associated with ADHD is something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And it's essentially if I feel or perceive rejection, there almost is like a physical sensation of rejection. And, I can get pretty emotional, like when I feel if like my ideas are rejected, if I'm not being heard, if I'm not being understood. And a lot like not being understood, not feeling understood or accepted is a massive piece of it.
Absolutely. And I can see how that would happen. I love how you described how it would happen in boys. I have a niece and nephew actually who ADHD is, I guess, their diagnosis as well, and they're on meds for it. And they're the hyperactivity, like extreme hyperactivity of need to be in sports and need to be involved in activities to kind of burn some of that. You can see that, like, they're here a couple of Christmas ago, like out shoveling the driveway. Like you have to get rid of the excessive energy, right?
Yeah.
So, and I know everyone is quite different that might have, ADD or ADHD. And I think everyone's just, instead of ADD now it's ADHD, right? It has changed and shifted with that. So I guess, so once you've gotten to know, what age were you when you got to know that you were, you had this ADHD?
Almost 40.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a late life diagnosis.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's very common for women right now because again, like I was a model student in elementary school. I asked my mom about different things and she was like, oh, well, there's nothing wrong with you. You're fine. Like, you used to, in elementary school, you used to do the silent reading with all of the other kids, and then you would be done first. So then you would take a book in the back of the classroom to sit in the teacher's rocking chair and then read to the other kids. And so, I was literally like the model student, but at the time, like, you have to think about that. Why was I done first? And I would push to be done first a lot. So, I mean, it's like kind of these behaviors that you sort of take for granted, that they all kind of add up to like, oh yeah, you know what? Like you've actually been suffering with this your whole life and not noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and that's, I mean, like I can imagine getting those insights, what that's like, and then you can now go to, okay, so this is what it's been like in my university years and my initial work years, and this is why maybe some of these things,
Mhm.
you've had difficulties with, or you can try to look at like from a
Yeah.
different lens, I guess, when you kind of look back on that. Can you talk a little bit about work history, how that's been?
Yeah, it's been rough. So,
Mm,
um, I have a whole bunch of education. I don't know, you can see some of it on the wall.
yeah.
Um, I got my graphic design diploma in 2002. Then I decided I'm going to go to Acadia. Then I decided I got an English degree. Then I'm going to go to New York and get a master's of science in publishing. Fantastic. Then I come back to Nova Scotia um, and realize, okay, like even then, 20 years ago, people didn't hire graphic designers like in their own right in entry level positions. So I started doing a lot of communications positions where, you're kind of a Jill of all trades, where you like, yes, I'm designing the annual report, but like I'm also writing part of it and I might be taking the pictures for it. In the last corporate job I had, it was like I was doing publications coordination, but also communications. So it's like their website, their social media, and there's a lot of jobs like that. I mean, actually, even my husband has a job like that right now, and he has a PR background. Um, so I jumped around in these positions, and essentially, when there was change, so like I remember I was in a position for 2 years, and then for some reason they moved me from one team to another team, and I hated it. I hated it. I was doing something very different. Then I had different responsibilities. I don't like they didn't do a good job of explaining why. And then in the end, like after 2 years, they were like, it's not a good fit and let me go. And I was devastated. I didn't see it coming. I just literally came into work one day and they were like, can we see you in this meeting room? And the person that hired me wasn't even in the room. And they just let me go. And I obviously like devastated, had no idea. Um, and then again, like my most recent experience, I was at a company for 4 years. And I was outperforming everyone in anything. The person in the job before me was doing it 3 days a week before she retired. Um, so they hired me for 5 days. I could do the job in two and a half.
Mm,
And I was literally bored out of my mind. I was like, what do you want me to literally do for the other 2.5 days? And I don't know. And then there was a massive leadership change. And that wasn't communicated very well, wasn't handled very well. Um, my boss at the time literally like mic drop quit after being there for 25 years. Um, and so, and then like there was an HR person in our department and like that, she left, like she retired. So basically anybody that I could have talked to was gone. I ended up going on stress leave for 6 weeks and started talking to this conflict coach. And then, when she said neurodiverse, I was like, okay, like maybe that's a thing. But yeah, it was really tricky. So change was really hard. I'm a very direct person, which is a neurodiverse trait. I'm not gonna BS around on you. Like, I'm not gonna tell you what you want to hear just because you want to hear it.
mm,
Excuse me. Um, so I hope that people will communicate to me in the same way. I'm very nice and pleasant about it.
yeah.
But I'm not gonna just feed you a bunch of fluff. And so sometimes really subtle communication can be hard for me. So, if someone is trying to tell me you shouldn't do that, they should just very politely explain to me, please don't do that because X, instead
Right.
of saying, well, sometimes in this sort of situation, somebody could not do that. But like, I'm lost. And
Yeah.
then I'm like, oh, are you talking about me? Like, so sometimes the interpersonal relationships in the workplace were challenging for me. I've also come to find out, sort of separate from the workplace that I do have some sensory sensitivity to things that are like too loud, too busy, too bright. And so I suspect like maybe that was an influence too. Like maybe I could snap at somebody or something, not realizing that like the construction outside was actually really affecting me.
Yeah,
So it's been quite the journey.
I bet it has by the sound of it.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that you've chosen your journey of entrepreneurship, because otherwise we would have never met and had an opportunity to work together. So,
Yeah.
it has been awesome though. You and I have really connected on like how you work together, putting things on screen. I like that real, being able to say, yeah, I love it. Now can we tweak it? Like, being able to be real and being honest. So in workplaces, you find sometimes people talk about accommodations, now called workplace adjustments.
Mm.
So when we look at those, people I think they've gone from accommodations because people think money to adjustments route. And like, there's lots of different things. Like, so you talked about noise, you talked about busyness, brightness. What are some other things that folks who are neurodiverse might have some sensitivities to?
Um, it's really interesting because I have been thinking about these kind of things just recently.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen some job postings come up. I'm not really interested in getting a job again. But like sometimes you just see something and you're like, oh, and I was thinking like, what kind of accommodations would I ask for? I'm like, I don't know. Um, I think just from like a hiring perspective, I'd love to know interview questions ahead of time. I think sometimes my brain can jump to different points, and sometimes I can like get sort of sucked into a rabbit hole. Um, an important point that I want to make here about that is sometimes I over explain, and like this podcast recording, it's a little meta. Um, I may be spending more time than like some people may want explaining something, but because I'm neurodiverse, I have traditionally been very misunderstood, or I have had conflict because of like miscommunication or misunderstanding, and my brain wants to avoid conflict at all costs. So in like a job interview, I might get very nervous and like not answer the question to the complete best of my ability because I'm worried about how that answer is going to be perceived. Like I've already jumped to that step. So if I had the questions ahead of time, I could just write down the key points that I wanted to cover. So that would be one thing. And I think in the workplace, one of the reasons that I became an entrepreneur was that I wanted autonomy over my own time. So this is a neurodiverse issue. It's also a feminist issue. It all comes down to what I call the laundry on the lunch break. When I was working at this big corporate place, 2019, I sat down with my boss and I said, could we just have work from home Wednesdays? I just want to like not spend my entire Saturday doing laundry and other stuff. I'm like, it would be very easy for me on my lunch break to just like pop my laundry in, then go do the work, then change it over on my break and, whatever. She looked me square in the face like this and said, we will never work from home as long as I'm here. And that was in 2019. And I was like, well, hope, then, then I
Pandemic
left.
hit.
Then
Pandemic
hit. And I was like, how's that working out for you now? Great.
But like
Yeah.
for instance, most people, I'm not going to say most, put the caveat in, like a hybrid work model, like a couple days in the office, some time at home. A lot of us like working from home because we don't have the interruptions. We don't have all the stuff. We can control our noise levels, our lighting, our heating. Like there's so many things that we have within our
Wear
control.
whatever you want.
Yes, 100%, right? Like not having to have a certain uniform that might be uncomfortable because of the textures and feels and like all those sorts of things, right? They impact us. They truly do.
Yeah, I saw a position open in Halifax and I looked at it and it was 5 days a week and it was like 1 to 2 at home. And I was like, no, thank you. Because I like, I'm even trying to work towards a 4-day a week model. I'm not there yet. But I'd love it. I'd love to do 4 days a week. But again, really, it's about we're humans and we have other things to do. And we live in a world where we have the technology to balance it out. You get up, you put the laundry in, you do a meeting, you change the laundry, work on a project for an hour, then you go put the dishes in the dishwasher, you do another work for another hour, you have your lunch, we're very capable of putting, it's like hybrid is like work environments of at home and office, but we are all really right now working in a hybrid way where we're like personal task, business task, personal task, business task, like it's all there. And like, we are all intelligent enough and responsible enough professionals to balance it. We know what we need to do. And from a neurodiverse point of view, some of us can do it faster. And so if you literally chain me to a desk, here's the task you need to do by the end of the day. It takes me 2 hours. What am I doing for the rest of the day? I've had the privilege to coach some people in their young people who are new in their career. And I had to come up with a solution for them because the work environment was, you have to work 8 hours a day. And they're like, okay, but what if I get it done in 3 or 4 or 6? Like, what do I do with the rest of that time? Because they are feeling guilty because they've been told, like, you must work these amount of hours a day. The general accommodation, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, workforce adjustment. Yeah.
Yeah, is that I would love to see is that I would like to be judged on my outcomes, not my process.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes get my best ideas in the shower. I get my best ideas vacuuming the floor. So sometimes you have to deep think about something, and 15 notifications on your phone or like 20 emails coming in, like that's all noise, where it's like, what if I actually just went and vacuumed this floor for 10 minutes? Now I've solved the problem. Right. Yeah. So I'd love to see that attitude of, here are the deadlines, and here are the outcomes that need to happen by those deadlines. Do you meet them? Yes or no? And an interesting other accommodation that neurodiverse people like, including myself, is almost creating some false deadlines. So if the deadline is too far in the future, we're going to procrastinate the crap out of that. So, sometimes if you have a project, here's this project that's due in 3 months. It's like, we're not doing anything for 2 months. I can guarantee you it's just not happening. But if you break it down into, week by week, almost, here are the things you have to have done. Yeah. Then, we get dopamine by like checking off that little task every week or whatever. And then, you can see the progress that's being made against the outcomes. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what are workplaces missing? Like, because you're not in it, like your workplaces that you left, I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, they're missing the Amy's of the world.
Yeah. This is the thing. I have talked on a couple of different podcasts about this, specifically saying, like, if you are an employer and you are experiencing a labor shortage, some of us have taken our balls and gone home because we cannot stand inflexibility, judgment, based on processes instead of outcomes, these things. And also, like, types of communication, like, if you have an employee that you think like, they're too direct, like, you can give, like, we're open to coaching, you can give me some coaching about like, could you can soften this in this way or like whatever. But really, try and value it. I have clients that do. I had a client say right to my face, like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for just telling me what like it is. So learning to value things that you might not think are valuable, is an
Yeah.
important lesson too. I wish I had, here's my list. Here's my list of 5 things that, but I don't know myself. You're right. I'm not in it right now. It would take a lot to get me to go back. Like I would want like a higher salary than I'm making now. I would want a 4-day work week. I'd want flexibility, like in terms of hours, be judged on my outcomes instead of my processes. I'd want, definitely the flexibility and space of where I work, those kind of things. I said I don't have a formal list yet, but I'm working on it.
No, that's good. I mean, some of the research I've done through working with a tech company, and a lot of folks talked about their neurodiversities, is sometimes they had a Slack channel and they get on and said, I'm not having a good day. So like people know that, hey, to give extra support, give like a little bit of extra space, whatever it is that that person needs. Because everyone functions and works differently. Like we all do. Our processes are different. Our hours are different. Like sometimes I'll work, like I can work 12 o'clock at night. I can work in the daytime, like all sorts of hours, depending on what it is that I'm doing, the project I'm working on. I always say I don't want to go back to a job. That's what I call it. We spell it out here in our house, a job, right? What that looks like. I love the life of entrepreneurship because I get to control a lot of what I'm doing. I get to control who I'm working with, what this looks like, some time, hours, work-life balance. Like you, I'd like that abilities to be able to do a dish, like throw laundry, and to be able to step away from my desk without someone looking at the clock. Like, what time is it? Like, there's, you get away from all that judgment. But same thing, like, can concentrate on the task, can get it done. Those time management skills, and we don't always give people that opportunity to be able to view these things. Be more creative, looking at what that looks like outside of our jobs, like that we're hired for. So within organizations, I find that sometimes people are let go because you got hired for a specific job and specific criteria. But when you got in there for some reason, and it might be boredom, and it might be whatever that is, it looks like the person's not performing on task. But no, instead of that, they're like, you haven't given them enough of a challenge. So why not create opportunities and freedoms to look at those person's strengths and what else they can bring to your organization, right? That whole fulsome package.
You know what? At the last organization I worked at, I was forcibly let go. Like, not only did they not create opportunity for me, I was stifled. And then like the way that I was let go was they made up things and wrote letters and put it in my file, so that they would have a reason, because they were like, how do we get this person out of our organization? Like they're lucky I wasn't in the union at the time, because I they would have been in for a massive fight. I wrote letters against every single thing that they said, because none of it was true. Oh, this person sent an email without permission. Please see attached the email, which literally says I have permission to do this. Right? Like, yeah. So I can tell you, I'm a human being and I have self-esteem, and it's taken me a long time. Like, I don't know if I'm still over it. Like, I think I'm still a little salty about it, about like, especially like when I see this organization, and it's prominent, it's like around me everywhere. So, and I know other people that have worked there, and like this organization actually ousted someone else in the same way. And that led me to realize, okay, like it's not you personally. Well, it sort of is, but this other person wasn't neurodiverse. So I was like, well, you just don't want these people around for some reason. But I don't know. It was, when you talk about HR people just letting people go instead of actually thinking about it, I'm like, can you actually stop and think that these are real people? We're all real people with real lives and real salaries and families and things to do. And, it's really disruptive. It might just be like, okay, I want this person off my desk or out of my office, but it really affects people for long periods of time.
Absolutely. We don't always think about, I come from healthcare, and I'm one of those folks. I didn't always think about what was the person's story, where did they come from, what's going on. Like, we didn't always provide that supportive role. How can I best support you as an employee, as a worker, as a valued employee. Like that should be the language, right? Valued, because we
Yeah.
value you for all you have to bring. Like we
Yeah.
don't always go to that place. Sometimes we find it's easier just to box a person in. Language from my past, box people in, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then that way, hopefully they'll either will get enough so that we can, get rid of them, or they'll voluntarily quit on their own. Not a great way of thinking,
Yeah.
period, right?
No.
Not.
And I mean, the absolute worst part was the supports that I had through that job, access to this conflict resolution coach, access to my own healthcare plan. They pulled the carpet out from under me overnight. And I was
Yeah.
like, great. So now I think there's something wrong with me. I have to go to a psychologist and a lawyer who both tell me, no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just them. But then I'm like, okay, this is not the first time this has happened. I'm the common denominator here. I mean, at this point, I know, okay, there's a neurodiverse diagnosis here. So like, I wish I had been able to stay a bit longer and find that out and then realize, okay, you know what, I need these accommodations.
Yeah.
Or I could have left and found, a different employer that was better. But like right now, I don't even know how I would look at a job description and know that it's a safe place.
If you saw, so I work sometimes with companies looking at your DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging policy.
Yeah.
So we've started integrating the language neurodiversities into this policy, right? You can be who you are, neurodiverse, bring your gender expression, sexual orientation, race, religion, all these things in there. So neurodiversities is something that I've intentionally put in there, and we have a conversation around it about neurodiversity because it's certainly obviously neurodiversities have been on the go for years and in different forms, but it's something people are starting to get intrigued about, I think, and starting to look at, well, how do we actually help? Like, how do we be that employer that supports? So I always say, if we put it out there and people read it and we become that employer, hopefully then we're going to be supporting more people that can come into your workforce, right? Like putting it there, like stating, we support people who are neurodiverse. We support people who are, whatever identity that people have, like supporting all people really, truly, but listing it, saying it.
Yeah. I mean, if I read that in a job description, I would say, okay, but how?
Right.
Like how do you do that? Like if the job description read something like, we support neurodiverse folks by allowing schedule flexibility, work location flexibility, things like that, that would intrigue me.
Yeah.
But it's always tricky, right? Because if you look at the job and you're like, oh, I really want to work for this company, or like this job sounds really interesting to me, and then that language is in there or even not in there, you're like, when do I bring this up? How do I bring this up?
Yes.
Like, is it going to be a deal breaker for them? Is it going to be a deal breaker for me? And should it be, because like a lot of times it was just taking a chance. Like I go to an organization and like, great, I now have to wait 6 months to see if it's okay.
Right. And this is shifting that mindset. So when you have that in there, when you're doing an interview process, they're actually saying to people during the interview process, yes, they're giving you the questions. They're saying, is there a way that we can best do a workplace accommodation for you? Stating, if you have a religion that's other than Christianity, we look at those 5 days off. We look at providing, it might be stands at desks for people. It might be, earpods, looking at all the different things that we can support people. That way it's taking the fear out of, because it's a coming out in a different way. I'm used to coming out being gay, being queer. So it's a coming out of, I have neurodiversity, and it's a different sort of coming out because out of fear, are they going to hire me? They're going to fire me. Like it's all these things. Am I going to get the supports I need? Am I going to get like all these things that we need from workplaces? So it's no doubt that similar potentially experience of it's a coming out of being vulnerable and telling people what we need. Right.
And the thing is, some of us don't even know. Some people don't know, A, that they're neurodiverse on that scale somewhere.
Right.
Or B, like they might not even know until something happens that they need that accommodation. I would just be like, oh, I'm fine. It's fine. It's no problem. And then something happens, somebody gives you a bad review or something. That was a thing. Just separately, I went through all these jobs. Not tons of them, but like I would say 3 to 4 jobs, and never had a proper performance review. Like I was at a company 2 years, never had a performance review, didn't even know what it was. Then I heard it somewhere and I was like, oh, I would like one of those. Like, how many employees actually ask for a performance review? Like, people don't, they don't want to be told that they're not doing a good job or whatever. So I asked for one, and then they let me go. Instead of giving me one. Instead of giving me an opportunity, they let me go.
The irony of you wanting to know how you can do better potentially, right? Or whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Yep. And then the last organization I was in, I was there for almost 4 years. I had never had a performance review. This new leadership came in and said, well, that's the first thing we're going to do is do performance reviews. And literally just, I don't know if it was by chance or whatever, but I had to write a portion of it and my boss had to write a portion of it. I literally went into my boss's desk, gave her my half of the performance review. And she was like, oh, are these due today? And I was like, yep, that's what it says on the sheet. She goes, oh, okay. And an hour later, she quit. So I was like, I still have not had, like, I've had a 20-year career and I've never once had a completed performance review.
I would like to give you one right now if you're open to it.
Sure.
I think you work brilliantly.
Oh,
you give lots of feedback. We've talked about everything's from colors to design to all these things. You're always open to my feedback. You've been open to my wife Carol's feedback when it comes to working with us. You always ask, does this work for you? Times, flexibilities, and all those things. I think you're fantastic and fabulous. I'm just going to put that out there. And whoever hears this podcast should 100% connecting with you. 100%. That's always my recommendation when people are looking for things. I do pass along your name and those things when they're ready for it. No, honestly, like I do believe in your work and what you're doing, and we're still working on projects together.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. And I don't work on projects together because I'm not always that easy to get along with.
Really? I'm like, I think you're great, Stephanie. Working with you and Carol, has honestly been so rewarding for me. Like, it's a bit meta to be in an underrepresented group, to work with you, and hear these definitions of, even this term underrepresented. Like, I would not have used that if I had not worked with you. And I even remember one time we were working on a design and I was like, and I'm just going to move this little guy over here. And you were like calling me out a gender, that should be gender neutral elements on his screen. And why are you calling him a guy? And I was like, okay. And there's several times now where I'm thinking about things and I'm like, what would she say? But it's been good. It's been really great, to work with you. And, your logos was one of the most challenging ones I've ever done, because to include so many things and so many elements was really rewarding. And, I'm really proud to be doing work with someone who is doing this important work that you're doing. And I'm super happy that you've been able to include me on this podcast as part of these really important conversations.
Absolutely. So tell folks, how can they reach out to Amy if they want some fabulous design work done, if they want any of those things done that we talked about so far?
Sure. So my website is pixelsandpieces.ca. I can be reached at hello@pixelsandpieces.ca. I do graphic design, web design. I love teaching. So I've done courses at NASCAD. I can do Canva classes, graphic design, little workshops at your organization. Or you can reach out to your local entrepreneurship organizations. I work a lot with those as well.
Fantastic. Thanks for being such a great podcast guest and being on Be the Change, because you are the change, and embrace that.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Thanks so much for being with us today. comment below, subscribe, connect with me at stephanie@diversitynl.com or on LinkedIn. Be the change.